School Board meeting to order. It's Monday, October 27th, 2014. We are in the boardroom of the Fisher Building, 12121 West North Avenue, and we will begin with a moment of silent reflection, please. Thank you. Mrs. Galante, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bodden?
Here.
Mrs. Casey?
Here.
Mrs. Fee?
Here.
Mr. Kroner?
Here.
Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Here.
Mrs. Randall?
Here. Thank you. First item is public comment on non-agenda items. If anybody would like to speak on something that is not on tonight's agenda. The members of the Wauwatosa School Board value the input of students, parents, staff members, and community members. The board's regularly scheduled meetings provide an opportunity for opinions and concerns to be expressed publicly. The board values all comments and will respectfully consider this input in decision-making. The board requests that individuals limit their comment on each item to 3 minutes. Following any comment, an individual board member may respond on the issue raised. However, it is not the intent of the public comment portion of the agenda for the board to enter into a debate with a member or members of the community. Because non-agenda items are not publicly posted in advance, no action will be taken on public comment regarding non-agenda items this evening. Is there anybody who would like to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, thank you. And we will begin then with our presentation from Lincoln School. Principal Michelle Miner, Lincoln staff and students are going to be presenting on the effects of increased student engagement. They're going to discuss their school's focus on individualization and how their message of Find Your Spark prepares students to be successful at Lincoln and beyond. So welcome and thank you.
Thank you very much for having us. We're really excited to be here. I am Michelle Miner. I'm the very, very proud principal of Lincoln Elementary. Lincoln has such a robust and wonderful history, and I'm thrilled to be part of its future. And we have some exciting things to share with you today. Like we said, we've really been focusing on student engagement this year. How do we get students actively involved in their learning? How does this provide ownership and really help them think about their future and what their next steps are? When we're doing this, we're trying to make learning meaningful, and thus the Find Your Spark. Find what interests you, find what motivates you. Share with us how you learn and how you grow. And we've been starting to examine a little bit about universal design for learning, which is a set of core principles of curriculum development where we give all individuals equal access and opportunities to learn. So we've been starting to think about that as well. And I have Ms. Adesui, our counselor here, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about what we're working on.
Good evening. This year, we also, a big push for our students is college and career readiness, and we've talked about at Lincoln, especially over the last year, how to build a better school community. And one way we can do that is, and we know that our teachers work really hard every day to do that, and we know that the district has principles that support that as well, such as the unveiling this year of the core principles of teaching and learning, and we feel that our staff is really striving to engage all students, to motivate all students. As a school counselor, I also have the privilege of teaching guidance lessons, and so I feel a big focus of what I teach the students is on careers. And so the students themselves have some things that they want to share with you about how they've been able to find their spark. And so we have students that we're going to start with SK, and we have one or two to represent each grade level.
My name is Lucy, and I was graduating in 2028.
And what's your spark?
Helping teachers in the classrooms.
Awesome.
My name is James Dalton. I will graduate in 2027. I will be a dad and travel the world and learn in school.
Oh my gosh.
My name is Curtis, and I help people. And I'm the dad.
My name is Legend Pace, and I want to help people with other sports.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Missouri Roadcap, and I will be graduating in the year 2025. I find my spark by being with animals. In particular, I love horses. Animals can't talk like you and I can. It's important for someone to have a voice for them. I want to be that person. I think my spark of speaking will help me when I grow up and stand up for animals. We are learning about animals that are endangered, and I have learned about protecting the environment. My spark for speaking will someday help me in all of the animals.
Hi, I'm Effort Cruz from class 2024. I find my spark in science. We work together in groups, and we all get equal jobs to do. We record data in our interactive science box. I think like a scientist. I always wanted to be a scientist, and now I'm getting a chance to be one. Did you know Pluto is no longer a planet? This was decided because Pluto does not clear its orbit of other space stuff like asteroids. I read that Pluto may become a planet again because other planets like Jupiter and Earth haven't cleared their orbits either. As a third grade scientist, I think Pluto should definitely be a planet again.
Hi, I am Henry Desard from the class of 2023. When I am an adult, I would like to be a house-flipping veterinarian. Going to Lincoln School helped me get closer to my goal. I find my spark each day in science and math. The information that I learn in science gets me excited and makes me eager for the future. I enjoy doing experiments and recording my findings in my notebook. While in math, doing the challenging problems in Math Olympiad really makes me think in new and complex ways. All of the knowledge that I learn at Lincoln School will help me become the world's first house-flipping vet.
Hi, I'm Josh Anderson from the class of 2022. I found my spark being kind and helpful to other kids. This is my second year on the Lincoln Peace Patrol. This means that I'm a peer mediator that helps younger kids solve conflicts that happen at recess. I feel supportive and responsible after helping littler kids solve their problems. When I'm an adult, I want to be an architect. The skills I'm learning at Lincoln while helping others solve their conflicts will someday help me work through my problems in my job as an architect.
Hi, I'm Nora Pinek from the class of 2022. I find my spark in art. I like drawing things and making things. Art class gives me a chance to be creative and happy. I can take the skills I learn in art and apply them to science projects and social studies presentations. Doing art gives my brain a chance to relax and see problems in new and different ways. When I'm an adult, I want to be an artist. Everything I'm learning at Lincoln can help me achieve this goal.
Thank you very much. Big round of applause for us. Also, a big thank you for all the parents who brought them here today, too.
Well, I'm Amy Whitteman, third grade teacher at Lincoln, and my spark has obviously been the fantastic Lincoln students and parents that I've been fortunate enough to work with for 28 years, I think. But I have a new spark this year, and it's Michelle Miners. I've had 4 different principals. They've all been very good in their own way, but I truly think Michelle is an educational leader, and she's really gotten me excited about teaching again. Not that I wasn't excited, I was. Even more excited about teaching again. And I think Lincoln's very fortunate to have her. Each month we have a monthly assembly in which she makes a video, and again, we're focusing on our spark. And I think the kids enjoy seeing these videos because they all get to see themselves in it. You can follow her on something called Twitter at hashtag what's your spark?
Find your spark.
Find your spark, thank you. Or Mitch Miner, at Mitch Miner. So we want you to sit back and enjoy and watch Lincoln find their spark.
And this is the unveiling of the next video from the assembly, so you're seeing it first.
Stephanie Dalton. I'm a first grade teacher at Lincoln Elementary. And as I was thinking about what I was going to share this evening, I was going to share my spark. I think I like to speak for most or all of the Lincoln Elementary teachers when I share what I'm going to share. Lincoln Teacher Spark this year and every year is to help our students find their spark by getting to know the whole child. We want to give them engaging opportunities to show their strengths, help them explore ways to meet their goals and overcome their challenges. We want to be their giants. We want to support them and help them, motivate them so they can meet all of their goals. So thank you for having us tonight.
So once again, thank you. I have an incredible group of people that we work with. Our students are amazing, and we're a very fortunate school, and we know that. Right now, I have a little something. The students would like to ask you what your spark is. And if you can tell them what your spark is, they will give you one of our Lincoln Spark bracelets. Thank you again for having us.
My part's helping kids.
Oh my God, are they cute enough?
I get one? I'll take one.
Hi. I find my spark in Anna and Sam. They are my grandchildren. They're 5 and 7.
Education.
Thank you.
Hi. Problem solving.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Where do I find my spark? My 2 kids in there learn.
Let's go in the front. What did you say?
It's 2 kids. I'm sitting on the side.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I see other staff members from Lincoln here tonight, and I appreciate it. And if I thought I could get all the names right, I would. I do see Mrs. Anderson, Mrs. Knazel. So thank you all, parents, families, staff, Mrs. Miner, Jessica, thank you. And especially to our young students. Yeah, you definitely, I think, light a spark on the members of the school board tonight. So thank you again. We appreciate it.
Did you want to say something?
Where do you find your spark?
My part? I already have one. Can I get another one?
I think we all got it. Yeah. Connie, did you get one?
Max is going to find his spark.
Okay.
Thank you.
Does anyone up here not have a bracelet?
I think we all earned ours. So thank you.
There's a future class.
Tim,
Tim, did
Yeah.
you get your spark?
Oh, we need a bracelet.
Right here.
There.
Mr. Patton.
Make him tell you what he's going to find his spark though.
Oh my gosh. All right. Wow, that was great again. Okay, next item on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion or action? Okay, seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Move to approve. I second.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on the consent agenda? Seeing none, Mrs. Galante?
Mr. Bodden?
Yes.
Mrs. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes, thank you. We are going to have one report prior to the tonight's action items as it relates to the action item on the budget. So this is business services, the buildings and grounds report. Dr. Ertl, do you want to start?
We just wanted to have this presentation prior to the budget because some of the components that we're talking about have changed a little bit and are included in the budget. So Mr. Mack and Ms. Nettisham will share their information.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I will be presenting on 3 different items tonight. The first will be an outdoor facility administrative. report. This second will be on updated capital project list. And the third component, which I'm actually compromising into, or it's going to be a component of the capital project report, is going to be a safety and security entryway project that the district is looking into partaking in. So the first thing I'm going to start with is the outdoor facility administrative report. And unfortunately, Mr. Wick could not be here tonight, but him and I have met and discussed this. And just, I think actually in March, I believe it was, were presented by Mr. Kolcheski and Mr. Wick on the initial outdoor facility administrative report. So this is just a follow-up to let you know what recommendations Building and Grounds and the Recreation Department are bringing forward today based on user group feedback and what is best for the district. So back in March, you saw a slide similar to this, history of improvements. I believe you saw about 5 different slides. I did narrow it down because it was repetitive information. So since last presentation in March, Brightlow, we've completed the artificial turf on the baseball fields and created youth fields and expanded the storage. And that is here at the Fisher Building, which is located actually right to the south of us. Whitman, we actually completed the artificial turf of the soccer field. Designs and pre-construction of bleachers and the entryway are on way right now. After those are completed, the entire project will be done. Underwood, construction renovated the 2 exterior staircases. It's self-explanatory, but what they were crumbling, they were falling apart, so we had to upgrade them. And we did that actually this last fall. They are completed. Longfellow, that's on our list to get done probably in the next couple years. It's in need of renovation. The tennis courts are literally in the bottom, underneath the cement, falling apart. And the playground area is actually, there's not a playground structure, but it is an asphalt area, and that has potholes and such in it, which we are renovating this year and doing some minor construction to, but a complete overhaul is needed on that asphalt area. And this is a review back in March as well, but I wanted to bring it because I've gone through more of the surveys now. And some of the user groups' common feedback have been upgrading Longfellow's site. And what this is all encompassing. It ranged from things from their softball fields to the football field that has some ruts in it, which are fixable, and those are easy things, all the way to tennis courts, which are a pretty hefty amount of money and some time. Artificial turf, the Whitman soccer field, we've done that, so we're a step ahead. Improved Underwood diamonds and fields. That is an area that we have a lot of flexibility with some green space that we can upgrade probably in the near future. Some of it's some easy tasks, some of it ranges, in dollar amounts. Addition of restrooms and storage facilities. Any space that we can welcome more restroom and storage, we will, and we are looking into that currently. Artificial turf of Wauwatosa West football field. This was actually a pretty common one across the user groups, and I wanted to add that on this slide because I don't know if that was emphasized in the last meeting in March. Not just our football team wanted this completed. Lacrosse did, rec did. There were a couple of different user groups, specifically lacrosse, that would actually utilize the field. So I just wanted to emphasize that it's not just the football team that's looking to get that upgraded. The principals, more specifically to their own building, replacing Underwood concrete steps, again, that was completed. But replacing Jefferson Playground, we are looking into that, and I am currently meeting with parent groups to see what we can do about upgrading their other structure, their 5 to 12-year-old structure, which is in desperate need of repair. Finding additional green space, that's always a challenge. I wish I could just bring it into thin air, but I can't. But we are looking and we are being creative, and there are some ideas that actually you're going to see here on ways to improve that green space and find that additional space. Drop pickup improvements at Washington, that's still in the works. We are looking into the initial designing of possibly a turnaround. We are working with the city right now to see if we can get approval for a turnaround structure on near Washington so that it's not such a safety concern when dropping off and picking up kids. Upgrading the exterior basketball courts at Whitman. There's 2 hoops outside of Whitman currently that can be upgraded, and this is a smaller project, but something that is in need of happening, and we are looking into doing that. The asphalt itself actually will be taken care of when the DOT comes through and does their project. So free one on, not free, but essentially on our eyes, free from the DOT. Outdoor storage shed at East, again, we're looking into that spacing, permits, things of that nature. We want to build an outdoor storage space at East that doesn't compromise the green space itself. And sometimes that happens if we're putting up structures, we then take away land. And East doesn't have a lot of land to begin with, so we have to be careful with that and not jump into too fast of a decision on that if we want to maintain our green space. The next slide is the recommended improvements based on the user groups and feedback from those user groups, as well as in our recommendation, what is best for the district. And this is going to change a little bit from the slide that you saw in March. But the recommendation, after reviewing the user group recommendations and just overviewing what would be best for the district as a whole, not separating east and west side, but district as a whole, what we are finding is Whitman, which again is completed or close to completion, is already there. The next number 2, we would actually push West football field up to the number 2 spot. Longfellow and West softball field improvements, which would follow that user group recommendation and want. We push up to the 3 spot, and the number 4 spot would actually go to the east, artificially turfing the area, a practice area for practicing the soccer at East in order for them to play at Whitman. Right now they do have a space, it's just regular, it's not artificial turf, it's turf. So just to clarify that. One of the recommendations, and I want to go into this a little bit, this recommendation, the reason we're bringing this on the district's end of things, take the user groups out of that, which was an overwhelming response of, yes, let's artificially turf the West turf football field, or the football field, is when you look at the numbers here, you're talking about $1.5 million. And we're talking about the possibility of either taking the $1.5 million and artificially turfing West football field or East practice field. And when it comes down to it, West, we have the capability of not only just practicing on there, but hosting tournaments, having band practice on there, rain or shine, to an extent. We also have freshman JV and varsity can play on there. Community groups, junior teams can play on there, as well as, like I said, hosting the tournaments is huge. On the flip side, at East, it would be a practice field, and it would not be large enough to host a varsity team. So what that means is we would have an extremely nice practice field, probably one in the state. I don't know the statistics on that, to be honest, but we would have a really nice practice field for them to practice on, and we could also have some community groups play on that. But to host events, it wouldn't happen because we're not regulation size. It also means that we still have to find a place to play games. So we can only practice on that field. We can't play any varsity type games on that field. The other part of the West football field that we are actually putting into a design is, unlike other artificially football turfed fields, we would actually artificially turf the entire track area. And what this is, and the difference between that is, behind the field goal post, there would be extra green space. That green space is large enough for rec to have events. If there's a football practice going on, you can actually have 2 separate events going on, which is creating green space within our district. That is a huge need from our user group. So we're actually creating green space in that space when we don't have it right now. Our track events would actually be upgraded and not rained out because we'd actually have them in an area and use proper drainage on the north side of the field, which is unusable right now because of the amount of flooding that happens. Everything's pushed to that side. So with extra drainage, we would be able to utilize that north side of the field for the track events, and then again, utilize the middle of the field for possibly 3 different group activities in one night, which is a huge potential for the district. Recommended.
Question. Could we go back, please?
Yeah.
Now, the practice area at East is all they have. While West and Whitman it's a very expansive set of fields. So I guess I'm not understanding this. Why we would put East, it's not East versus West, I'm not so I guess I'm more interested in what the kids have rather than the events we can stage. And I don't,
Mr. Meyer, could
yeah.
I ask
Sure.
that that be part of our discussion after the presentation? So,
All right, it
is
was
that
just
okay?
building a lot of, it was just building a lot of momentum. Is this included in the budget we're voting on tonight?
We're gonna, Mr. Mack
For-
is gonna speak to that, so if we
Correct.
can get all the information and
Okay,
then.
I need to understand what we're
Right.
talking about when they're talking about it. And
Okay.
if this item like this is what we are voting on tonight, I need to know that while they're making the presentation.
Yes.
So I can start to form my thoughts.
As far as I know, no, this would not be part of the budget proposal tonight. This would be a project for the future.
What about the West?
A project for the future 15-16 school year, if that was to take place.
Okay.
It was not for 14-15 school year.
Okay, because the sequence we're doing this in tonight has me kind of confused about why we're presenting this before the action item of the vote. That's why I'm having to ask this question. So these things you're presenting here, are any of them in the budget?
The planning for the West football field is in the budget, the planning part of it. And it would be in next year's, actually in the 15-16 cycle, not the 14-15. But we have to start looking at what we're gonna do ahead of time to get everything ready to go before it can be done, because there's extensive planning when you're doing a project of this size.
You're about to lose my vote in the budget, because I'm not getting why we're proceeding this way. Sorry, but kind of how I'm looking at it. So,
Will it help Mr. Meyer to note that there's secured entrances that she will be discussing also, and those will be in the budget?
Mhm.
So
Correct.
this is one of
Yeah,
three
okay.
components,
yeah, the prioritization of million-dollar expenditures,
right,
to me, is a big deal.
right.
So I'm really needing to know how it relates. Opportunities for kids all over the district is a big
Right.
deal. So I apologize for being confused, but I'm confused.
Let me respond about the change. Part of it, the discussion we had at East High School, is putting an artificial turf field at East High School. The problem with it is the band marches, so it would be in the middle of where the band practices. Secondly, we just invested a significant amount of money in irrigation several years ago at the East Field to make sure that field was up and running. What we talked about is that there's no reason why we can't have students bus where they, over for practice, similar to what they do, they don't have any practice facilities for football or other ones at East, but they could go to Hart Park and use Hart Park for soccer practice. They can use Whitman. It's not a West Field, it's an East Field for soccer. So those are some of the conversations we had, but really looking at it and saying, putting that kind of money into a practice facility versus a place where games and practice take place.
Okay, but when I step outside from East High School, I see one little field, period. That's all the kids have when they step outside. I live in the West neighborhood, and when I walk by there, I see a lot of green space all over the place. So to argue that it's just a practice field ignores the fact that it is the only field that there is at East.
I just wanted, just so you know, actually in the actual budget, there is not a project start for the West football field. There's actually planning money for the East Theater renovation in there.
Okay.
There is no money in there. but we
Okay, we're
would have
talking
to
about
start
the West Theater has already been renovated, right?
Right, but that's
Okay.
completely done.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm done.
Okay.
Okay. The recommended improvements, these are some also large projects, but not as large as the ones that we were just speaking of. At East, expand the parking. That was a recommendation that we found quite frequently on the user groups, and I believe it's probably because when they arrive for any type of activity there, whether it be inside or outside, they have a hard time parking. And at Fisher, add kindergarten play structure, resurface exterior basketball courts, turf youth soccer field, which does not exist anymore, so it's Jefferson, replace main playground structure. Longfellow, improve area west of school, tennis courts, asphalt. And Madison, replace kindergarten playground structure. And at Underwood, replace kindergarten playground structure, recondition infields, regrade soccer field, and replace kindergarten playground. This one, Underwood, is, you'll see a bulk of improvements there, because right now they are just a youth field. And by just a youth field, I mean we do allocate more resources to the varsity fields on east and west side, both at Longfellow, all secondary schools, and then Underwood. We do allocate resources, but we don't have the time to put as much as we wanted to in Underwood. So it would be nice to renovate these areas and then keep up with them. Whitman, replace outdoor basketball hoops as we discussed, and West and Longfellow, add lights to softball fields. And this could be completed also when and if the softball fields are renovated in the near future. With that, any questions for this presentation?
Before questions, could you just review who the user groups are and your process for soliciting this information, for prioritizing, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Mr. Wick and Mr. Kolcheski, when they went out, they sought out groups all the way from the current staff at the high schools and secondary levels, and even actually in elementary schools. They also sought individual rec groups, varsity level sports. They actually took a wide variety, and we did end up with a wide variety, a lot from lacrosse, about 4 different responses from different coaches and things from lacrosse wanting something for in this district, which actually, let me add as well, on the west field we would add those lines, the lacrosse lines, which would actually be available to lacrosse to play and practice. So the field would be, just to answer that as well. But how the process for seeking out those different groups, it was done online, and they were able to submit that freely at their own will. I know that they did go around and ask people for their own feedback as well, and then ask them to submit a professional response. I know we got about 20 responses back. Some of them combined, said, hey, this coach and this coach, we're combining, and this is what we're saying for the entire lacrosse program. So all in all, it was actually a very evenly east-west rec varsity team, different sports, and actually about 2 of them were just purely inside sports that had some recommendations as well.
Okay. And then the things that you just talked about, the way you presented them, is that the priority, or is that just simply what you're looking at and prioritization is yet to happen?
That would be the prioritization based on user groups and the districts.
Okay, but what you showed in the order that you showed it is
1, 2, 3, 4.
The priority. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fee.
Thank you. And I'm sorry if I missed this. Is there a timeline for these things? You had the large outdoor projects. One of them's already been completed.
Mm-hmm.
And is there a timeline for the others?
At this point, Whitman, like I said, was already completed. I know we are looking to do the number 2 project based on the prioritization of this presentation in the 15-16 school year is what I have been told, and then the following projects would be done in the near future. I can't give an actual date on that.
So the funding for that is not in this budget that we're voting on tonight. Is that correct?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. And I'm sorry, on the smaller projects, the last slide.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Are these recommendations from you or from the user groups?
User groups.
Okay, so this is not what you're recommending that we actually do.
Correct.
Okay, thank
you. Although I did add, and I would agree with them, and that's why they're on the slide.
Okay, well, I thought that they were your recommendations until you mentioned that the youth soccer field isn't there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I wanted to ask the question, so thank you.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Well, I just have some specific questions on the projects.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if we start at the top with East, expanding the parking there, it's landlocked. There really isn't a lot of space to go. Are you talking about just reconfiguring how the parking lot is set up?
Yeah, essentially it would be an additional couple spaces or find some expanded parking elsewhere. That one's a very difficult one. I think that's more of a wish list.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we could look into, but yeah, we'd be cutting into green space as well if we ever wanted to change that as well.
Right.
So.
Okay. And then going down to Jefferson,
Mm-hmm.
that's just a unique elementary school that we have there with the, double layer, double layer with the main playground and then the smaller playground.
Correct.
And there's always been an issue of access between the two and how to make it more friendly for some of our special needs students. And is that all considered with this kind of project?
Yeah, one of the big items for the main playground structure is some of the designs we've gotten back already for the parent group to start fundraising for, they do include handicap accessible games, ground games, and then there's also a couple of different components to that, which the parent group and the students are going to decide what they would like. So it's an interactive parent kid group. They're very excited about it, actually. So but it will incorporate the handicap or even somebody on crutches. There's actually ramps that are made just for somebody that needs that special accommodation.
I would like to see that project moving forward quicker. I know that, it's been a number of years, over some of the others, just, mainly because of student accessibility and whatever else with the main playground might, need some repair. My last question really is in Longfellow, and we were talking about the asphalt area. What does that mean? Is it just recovering the asphalt area, or are we gonna, what could we do there to make it more, student friendly?
Absolutely. Right now, it's literally a rectangle of asphalt that the kids play on so that they don't, especially on rain days, so that they have a place to go. They like to hang out on them. There are a few basketball hoops on there. There's a shed where they can play different games on. It's more of a hangout for their recess, quote, unquote, recess area. It's right next to the tennis courts. What we would be looking to do there, it's in desperate need to be ripped up and replaced. If there are actual sewer lines that go underneath that have the ground is actually sunk in a little bit and the sewer lines have risen. You can actually see the sewer lines popping up through the asphalt area now. So one thing that we would look at is raising everything for the fact of our sewer lines as well, and then ripping up the asphalt and repaving, and then also putting the lines back down, and so that the kids have lines to play basketball on.
Right. So that project just is more involved with a lot of the city structure underneath it.
Correct.
Okay.
But we do have quotes, and we are looking into that.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Casey?
I was just kind of curious in that turnaround for Washington Elementary, what street or side of the building were you guys looking at implementing that or putting that, or is that just not that far along yet?
That is, and off the top of my head, I could say it's on the west end of the building. I apologize, I do not know which was that well enough to know the actual address, but it is on the west side of the building on that entryway. That the turnaround, that's the space that we have to be able to utilize a turnaround in. I know right now it's in the city's hands, and we are actually also working with them to just finalize and button up. Can people turn right out of there? Otherwise, it's going to cause a jam. It's one of those streets. It's the one street that actually goes all the way through, so they're also looking into that.
I appreciate that, and I look forward to hearing more information on that. My kids' school, Wilson and WSTEM, just implemented the Safe Routes to Schools. And, it's always new implementation, a little hairy, but the amount of people that disregard the do not enter signs is quite astounding. So I know that the district is really taking safety, security very seriously, and so I appreciate you looking at and going to those lengths. So thank you.
Mr. Croner?
Thank you. Thank you. That's a nice presentation. It gives a good overview of what could be done in the district. One discussion I'd like the board to have sometime is what we could do with this money educationally if we didn't spend it on some of these things, because we separate them as if there's a big wall between them and we're not making a choice. And this isn't a question for you to answer, it's more just a comment. For example, if I were to write a check to the school district and said, you can use this $1.5 million to put artificial turf on the football field, but if I didn't want to do that, where would you spend it in education? I mean, it would be nice for us to have that discussion sometime if that money might be better spent for struggling students, or to bolster our reading program, or to do some other kind of program in the district. So I know it's too late this year to have that discussion for this budget, but I think moving forward it would be helpful for me to have those kinds of discussions, because I know it's nice to have an artificial turf on the football field, but as a natural grass field, that football field at West is a pretty nice field. And I know we'd get some additional use if we put artificial turf on it, but I'd like to see what else could we do with that money if we were to spend it on education. So I'd like board members to consider, as we move forward, to have that discussion along with this kind of a presentation, so we can maybe make better choices about where the money's going to be spent.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Croner, your point is well taken. From my time on the board and working with Mr. Mack and Dr. Ertl, I never have viewed this as either or. So, but I think that a more in-depth discussion among the board with the administration is probably a good idea. So that would be good. I have a question about Jefferson. Have they started working on that beyond fundraising?
The playground?
Yeah.
There are designs.
Okay.
So that they knew an amount that they had to fundraise to.
Okay.
The other thing that is happening at Jefferson this year that was budgeted for was the resurfacing of their asphalt area and the relining, which we'll go over in the next presentation. That is happening this year, and that's an improvement to their area.
Okay, so I'm not sure on the small and medium projects, are those prioritized on here?
Those are just alphabetical order.
Those are alphabetical order. Okay, so is Jefferson's playground going to happen this year? Is that in the budget from last year, or is it going in, or?
Jefferson was not in the budget. The playground structure itself was not in the budget for this year.
Okay.
It's something we are looking into possibly putting into the budget for next year.
Okay, and so, for instance, the Fisher kindergarten play structure, the Madison kindergarten play structure, are parents and PTAs and other people working actively on fundraising for those things to happen?
Some are not.
Okay. And how does that play into your decision-making and prioritizing?
To be completely honest.
And I don't mean you only, Melissa, I'm sorry.
No, correct.
You
No,
know,
that's,
ours.
the way I can answer that is
Okay.
what I do in building and grounds is I take a look at each structure itself as well, and there is a safety component to each of these structures. And we can fundraise. Jefferson is at the point where it would be nice to have an upgrade. It's not at the point where we would have to replace it. And what I mean by that is there are some safety concerns, which we could replace some platforms, and it does get costly. Playground equipment is one of those oddly very expensive items that we need, and they're important to have in each of our schools. Jefferson, I think they're starting to fundraise because they want to see it be pushed up. And I think the parent groups do fundraise to say, hey, we'd like this to happen. Our parents are supporting this. Our kids want this. Right. We're going to start fundraising for it. At least that's the interpretation I get when I go around to the different schools. If this play structure isn't that bad, kids are loving it still. They like to go out and play. They don't talk about it. I also don't see a safety concern on our end. It's something that can take, it's not as high of a priority as something that says, yes, this is a safety concern. And parents are fundraising for it, or vice versa. It's just a safety concern, and we have to replace this piece or this entire structure. Okay. Is it helping answer the question?
It does.
Okay.
I just, a neighbor, spoke to me a while back who was actively involved in the fundraising and, was very excited about it. So I just didn't know if there's an active partnership. You hate to have people doing all that work. But, is it incumbent on them to speak to you or somebody at the district to make sure that, it's worth their time and effort?
Yeah, and the best way I can answer that is I go back to the safety. And if it's a safety concern, we do, Building and Grounds will take the initiative, whether we have parent involvement or not, to try to upgrade that structure. If parents come to us and say something of the lines of, hey, we are very interested in upgrading our structure, we actually then work collaboratively like we are with Jefferson Parent Group, where I'll go out to the couple of companies that do that type of work within the area, and we'll get different designs based on what the parent and the student group want. And then we'll put together the designs. We'll also say, hey, okay, let's we can minimize this by doing this. That's part of my job. That's what I'll go to them and say, this is what we can do with the amount of money that you're looking to fundraise and the amount of money the district can put towards it at this time or in the near future.
Okay.
And that's what we can budget for. And then they'll say, yes, we'll go to vote for this. And I know that that's, in some schools, that's very well received, and they really like that, and the work that they put into it, and they're proud of it, and the kids are excited about it, and they do little contests for it.
Right.
So it's something that the entire school sometimes gets involved in.
Okay. Okay. That's it for question. Mr. Meyer?
I just ask that before we actually, I know the planning is in the budget, but before we, on a line item basis, start to spend money on planning, that we bring the request back to the board for a discussion of priorities. Once the planning money is spent, it's going to be very difficult to stop short of doing the project. So I really believe that it's tantamount to making the decision to spend the money on the planning. The responsible thing to do is for us to discuss the priority before we do the planning. And I don't want to hold the budget hostage for the whole school district over this item. We need 5 votes to pass this budget. So that's all I ask. This was, frankly, puzzling to me why we had this business office presentation immediately prior to the budget when it's not about the budget.
Well,
so
there's
just
two
to
more
say,
components.
I know, just to say, I was confused.
Okay. There are 2 more components that Melissa's going to address, and some of those are in the budget. So with that, are you ready to continue then?
Sure.
Thank you.
The next presentation is to provide the board with an update on capital projects. There have been, and I'll go to the next slide, but there have been a couple of projects that we are bringing forward tonight because they were quote unquote emergency items. And I will go through them in more depth when we get to that point. There are some items, just like our own home, that emergencies happen, our furnace goes down, we have to get it up and running before the winter season hits. A water main breaks, we have to replace it, and it could be quite costly to fix that. So I want to just go over some of those items and let you know that that is in here, and we are going to explain the reason for that being in this presentation in full detail. So the first thing that we're going to start with are the completed projects in the elementary schools as listed. These items, just want to give a rundown of things that were approved and things that are completed. The first one is Jefferson. We waterproofed the south wall. I think we've gone into some detail. Mr. Kolcheski went into that when he was the manager and explained what that was. But essentially, we had a lot of leaking on Jefferson on the south end of the playground towards that wall. We had to actually dig up that area and waterproof the wall and the windowsills area. That is completed. Madison, new flooring abatement of offices, and addition of water fountains and new bathroom sinks in kindergarten classrooms. Again, this was a project approved project item. This has been completed. This was done in the summer. McKinley, masonry repair to boiler stack. This was bricks that were literally falling off and a hazard to our students and the boiler stack itself. So we had to replace that and do some repairs to that stack. Roosevelt, upgrade and renovate library. What we did was we recarpeted, painted, upgraded the furniture in there, and made it a better learning environment for the students that are there. I know that we just recently took a tour of that area in the library and was very, very happy about Roosevelt's upgrade, and the kids are loving it. So that was exciting to see. Underwood, replace exterior steps. I covered that in the last presentation, but ultimately it's self-explanatory, but we had 2 staircases that were literally falling apart, and they were actually a hazard, so we ended up going through that. Completed projects in the secondary schools. Longfellow, the PA system clock upgrade. This was the entire school renovation of their PA system. So now in every room again, talk about that safety component. Every room, every office, everywhere has a PA system that can be reachable. Their clock upgrade also ties into that PA system. New scoreboards for Longfellow Gym. East, renovation and abatement of science classrooms. This was a project that took place over the summer. Again, it was renovating and abating about 10 in total, actually, different areas of East High School, all in their science area, some storage rooms as well. Southwest roof replacement. It's a roof and we replaced it. Upgrade pool starting blocks. This was in collaboration with the pool and diving, or the swim and diving team. And I know that their blocks were falling apart and some of the anchors were loose. Again, a safety hazard, we had to replace them. West music hallway lighting upgrade. This was budgeted and it was a needed project. And again, that's one of those that amazing how some light can give a lot of feedback from students and how happy they are with having some light in the downstairs hallway area. Renovation and abatement of science classrooms. Same thing that we did at East, we did at West. So, completed projects at the Fisher Building. We had a couple of just small, loose little things that we had to wrap up at the Brightlow Fields. That project is now completed. East Wing AC repair. We actually just finished the little bit of roofing that we had to do around some of the electronics up on the roof. That's completed, and human resource office remodel that is completed as well. Projects in progress are scheduled in the elementary schools. Eisenhower, replace entrance exit doors to building. This is one of those that was a major safety concern, and the doors literally aren't closing, they're not latching anymore, which is a safety concern for our building that had to be replaced right away. So we actually have a temporary solution, and per the board's approval, we will go ahead and replace those doors. Jefferson, resurfacing and relining playground surface. This is what I was discussing in the last presentation, but again, it's simply resurfacing what's currently at the Jefferson playground. The parent group also got back to me and let me know what needed to be relined, so we are going to do that as well, and this will happen in the spring. Roosevelt, room 300 abatement and renovation, as well as all the exterior masonry and rebuilding of the masonry at the northeast and north wall. This was an emergency that had to happen. Actually, the day before school started, there was major leaking on the north wall. The brick has deteriorated away to the point where there was leaking that caused mold and asbestos, friable asbestos in room 300. We got everybody out of the room before classes even took place. It wasn't a safety concern to anybody in the building. We closed down room 300 and we had to start work on that immediately. The brickwork also will be done, and then there's some small section into the hallway next to room 300 that is not friable at this time. There is lead paint there that we're going to have to remove over Christmas break. Washington, repair of exterior section of boiler stack. Same thing as McKinley. This was a boiler stack the brick is falling apart, and it's a hazard to anybody underneath and also the boiler stack itself. Wilson, repair exterior masonry to emergency areas. Wilson has a couple of masonry, especially in their front entryway, that has now become an emergency repair. And again, upon the board's approval, we will go ahead and repair that, but at any point, the brick can give away and it will collapse. Projects in progress that's scheduled in the secondary schools. Longfellow, resurface area west of building. We'll look into this if it doesn't, the resurfacing of the area, we're hoping that we can actually for this year do a quick temporary patch over some of the potholed areas that we were discussing in the last presentation. And then in future years, we'll look into resurfacing and actually tearing that out and resurfacing the entire area. Upgrade and renovate restrooms throughout building. This was brought to me by a parent group, and there is a high demand for upgrading and renovating the restrooms there. We actually have kids that are getting locked in restrooms. They cannot get out. The sinks are still the kind that they're probably one of the oldest in the district, but you have to turn one handle and actually keep it turned while you wash the other hand, and then actually return the other handle. So it's very old-fashioned. It was put in years upon years ago to conserve water, but now it's a safety hazard to our students. Longfellow, repair exterior masonry to emergency areas. This is again another area where we have some brick failing, and I don't know if it was, I couldn't tell you why some of this brick is failing, to be honest. I know some of it due to the harsh winter we had last winter, and we're seeing some of that happen now. A small crack turned into a large crack, which now is creating an emergency brick or terracotta pieces coming loose. Whitman replaced boiler. We're replacing an old boiler with a more efficient boiler, much smaller, more compact boiler. Whitman upgrade soccer field with artificial turf. This is ongoing. This is the one where we have a couple of buttoned up little projects to do within the field area, but it'll be wrapped up in a timely fashion. East, replace supply fan. This is similar to if you own a home and your furnace goes out. At East High School, we had a supply fan. Actually, a weld broke, and what happened was it shot the entire fan through the ductwork. It completely ruined our fan and the motor that's associated with it. So it actually controls the temperature and the heating in the building. So we have to get that replaced. There is an 8-week to a 12-week lead time on actually getting the entire unit. It's a fairly large unit, about the size of 2 of the desk lengths in one room. So we have to actually cut a hole in the 3rd floor of that building, get that unit out and get it back in before we have to turn on the heat, which is approaching, although you wouldn't know from today. East, fire door basement and basement fire sprinklers. These were on the approved projects, and we are continuing with those. And the sprinkler project's almost done. Potential upcoming projects, again, for the 2015, 2016, or future budget. East, we are renovating, or we would like to renovate the East Theater. This will include new seating, upgrade to ADA accessibility, renovate lower level, upgrade sound and visual effects system. And there's a lot of components to this. This is a new rigging system. This is quite the renovation, and it's one that I'm particularly excited about. I think it's gonna, for how large the district is into not just sports, but also the arts and different community groups that use this, as well as our own students. I think that the East renovation to the theater is something that we could be really excited about and proud of after it's all renovated. We are looking into renovating. I don't know if anybody's been in the lower level of East. It looks worse than my basement right at this point. So and if you knew my basement, you would say, oh my goodness, I can't believe that. So at this time, we are looking to renovate that and put a little lounge area in there, make ADA accessible restrooms. It's going to be we are going to maintain the historic value of that theater, which is going to make it look like something that's brand new right from the generations that it came from. So the total of the project, and this is a rough estimate, we have some preliminary numbers, but it would be about $5 million for that project. West, upgrading West football field, replace natural turf with artificial turf, upgrade home and visitor bleachers, the scoreboard, and relocate track events to the north side of the field outside the track area. Again, we would make the entire track area artificial turf to create more green space as well. This would include football and lacrosse lines. And that would total about $1.5 million. The next component, again, it's within the capital projects. This is something that was brought to my attention, and with some of the recent safety and security concerns and threats that we've had nationwide, this is something that I take to heart, and I want to make sure that our students are as protected as they can be and as safe as they can be. And this is only one, and I know there's many more components to the safety and security of our students. Do you want me to go into this project? I mean, this is kind of a separate component to the capital project list. There could be quite a bit of discussion on this component. Would the board like me to stop and answer any questions, or would they like me to?
Would the board members like to hear from Mr. Mack at this point about what Melissa has already presented? Because, as she said, once we start talking about the secured entrances, that there probably will be questions about that too. Mm-hmm. So it's up to you. She can continue.
I think we should just continue.
Mrs. Meafeld?
Well, just for clarity, the projects that you outlined previously are currently in the budget. That's what I understood you to say.
Correct.
They're planned for in the budget.
Correct.
But there's still the component that Mr. Meyer brought up with the planning of the projects going forward. And did we, I don't know, I just heard Mr. Meyer's voice, so I'm just curious as how we can wrap that conversation up. Are we asking for planning on the larger projects or planning on the large, medium, and small projects? If that is the direction the board wants to give to administration. Because I do agree, once you go down that road, it's, it really, people are counting on it to happen. In a lot of cases, you're spending a lot on the planning phase itself.
So I think that's directed to Mr. Mack.
I don't know. Is it a direction that the board should give at this stage, or how would we like to proceed? I don't want to lose that point. I think it's a good point.
The smaller projects are in the budget. Some of those things are just pure emergencies, like the fan. You got to heat the building at East High School. We can't not do things of that nature. But the large project, like the East Theater renovation, what we were trying to do here is actually that would be in part of it maybe in the 15, 16, or 16, 17 budget. It'll be a 2-year. But we wanted to get more cost information, and to even do that we have to spend money just to figure out what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. That's what's in the budget right now for the East Theater. The football thing, we don't have to do anything. If you guys decide that we don't want to do that, we can stop. We don't have to go ahead with that. It's not in the budget to do that. I do have always in that Fund 41, it says project starts, and that's what that kind of money is used for. It's money that starts the planning process for the next year's, especially bigger projects that we have to plan, get architectural information, cost estimate, that type of thing. So the bigger things are not, those two big items, they're not in the budget really per se, except planning for the East Theater, because it's a big one. It's the biggest project we've ever contemplated doing here, at least without taking out bonds. And that's another thing. Without our fund balance, I'd be wiggling in my chair right now if you said we're going to do $5 million without taking out bonds. But that combined with the money we're going to get from the TIF that's going to close next year in July would enable us to do that without issuing any bonds, which is pretty remarkable, if you ask me, to do that type of project without doing all for bonds. So we're in a current situation that maybe, because I understand what Mr. Croner said too about looking at educational things, because I think that way too. I think that way all the time. But one thing that I think you should feel good about as a board is the simple fact that we're even looking at these things. And most school districts don't even look at this type of thing. And we're in a situation where we're actually debating whether we should do some of these things for extracurricular playground, different things, because we do have a situation right now where we can afford to do some things. How that plays out in the next 4 years, I have no idea, because we don't know what the revenue cap is going to bring as we move forward. But right now, I would feel actually good that you're even talking and debating these issues. So, but to go back to the original question, Sharon, yeah, that money for the big projects is not in there, and until you give some direction, we won't go forward with that unless you want to move forward with that.
But there is money in that budget for the East Theater renovation.
For planning.
Right.
Just for planning, just so we get more information on, because we already went through a thing where we got a general idea. This would be the next step, would be a more specific plan of what each phase would cost and what the general idea would be. But then we would have to come back and make a decision, do you want to do that or not?
Okay, and I pulled up a memo from Dr. Ertl from May, just to remind myself that we do talk about these things. It's not like this is the first time tonight we're hearing about it, but we get a lot of information and it's not always easy to remember. But he did follow up after the March presentation to say we're working on the plans for several projects that were mentioned in the capital plan, as well as the fields plan. We're moving forward with the plans to install field turf on the soccer field at Whitman this summer, and then we had to vote on that expenditure. We're also making a decision on an architect that will help us design the remodel of the East Theater. The stage is in bad shape, and the rest of it needs a serious update. We're also moving forward with more science room renovations. So what we're hearing about tonight are things that we have discussed, in some cases voted, for the turf and so on. But so I understand where you have to do this planning. I think that no one on this board stepped up and said, don't touch the theater at East. I think there was discussion and, implicit direction to please explore that. And as you said, it does cost money. So, but I understand too that we're voting on a budget tonight and we need to be clear about what's in there and what isn't. And I know, Melissa, that the secured entrances that we've been working on in the safety committee for over a year, there's been some timely information given about the cost that makes it possible to recommend that at this time. So I don't know if that helps, Mrs. Meerfield.
No, but
It
maybe
doesn't?
2 other board members might help.
Okay.
If I could clarify just one thing, and I apologize. In some of the projects, when we talk about planning,
right.
When you think about, and the best way I can equate it to is your own house. When you have ideas for your own house and you've got a set budget, you've got $20,000 and you'd like a window over here and you'd like a new fireplace. You don't even know where to begin with some of those costs because you don't. So you have somebody come out and say, well, yeah, you could have this. Well, is it a true number or not? Sometimes you do have to pay up front to get the ideas and just the numbers.
Right.
And we wouldn't want to come to the board and say, well, here's a project we'd like to do. Well, how much estimated would it cost? No idea. And sometimes we get those preliminary estimates, such as, even the West or safety security projects, or we do some of these to just keep the ideas flowing. This is ways we can improve our district, and this is how much it would cost roughly. The $5 million is a rough estimate. It's a general that we've started working on. And it's just to clarify what Mr. Mack said, and just to add to it, he's exactly right. To put that in the budget, it would just be to continue research on how much this would cost, because this is a larger project.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Fee.
Thank you. I'm not anti-planning at all, but I think if there's money in the budget for planning, and to Mr. Meyer's point about we don't want to invest so much that it becomes impossible to stop the process, How much money are you talking about for planning? What's the budgeted amount for that?
I mean, I have $50,000 in the budget.
I'm sorry, I should clarify, for the east.
For the east renovation, I have $50,000 in the budget. How much will it cost exactly for the east?
To be honest, it's probably about 26,000. I think it was 26,500.
Okay. Thank you.
Now, if we wanted additions to that, there would be additional planning.
When you think about the East Theater, though, it's a huge project, and you have to have a lot of lead time. We couldn't even start it until a year from March, and it would span over 2 years, actually. And then I
have no problem with the planning. I just want to know what the number is,
Okay.
and so I appreciate having some idea of what the number is. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions before she proceeds? Mr. Meyer?
The problem with the presentation for me was that it sprinkled around and intermingled what was emergency spending that's in the budget, what is capital spending that's in the budget, what is proposed for future capital spending, which is not in the budget, what is planning that we need to spend for future in order to prepare for future capital spending that requires prioritization in order to not come to a surprise rejection by the board. So it helps to have things clearly categorized so I can understand what of this presentation is money in the budget, and for the money in the budget, what's a we have to do on short notice. Some of those are emergencies, some are not emergencies, but you have to do it. And what is part of the long-term plan. So there's that happening for my wishes about what the presentation had been. The other thing I see going on is that the board needs to have a discussion about priorities, about and emphasis, and about whether the education we provide is going to be more than test scores for reading and writing. Whether we will provide an education that provides the children with a balanced set of life skills, such as athletics and the arts. And some in Wauwatosa believe that that should be one of our priorities. I am one of those people. Yet, by the same token, I was uncomfortable with not understanding what of this presentation is in the budget and what isn't. So it's very complicated. It's not everybody who had some discomfort about this and the budget all agree on everything. It's a very complicated thing. I do note that the vote for the artificial turf for the Whitman field was a 5-2 vote, and that's close to 4-3, and now that's an uncomfortable road to be going down as far as whether we can get consensus. So we need to lay out our priorities. We need to have this discussion on the board about whether the money we spend is for more than reading and writing, or whether there's other things we as a school district wish to spend money on. And that, of course, will justify planning. And then you get into all the questions about how much field space do you need for however many kids, wherever they are in the city, and that kind of thing, and that's a harder conversation. So that's all I have to say.
Mrs. Fee?
Thank you. You answered my first question, which was how much is this going to cost, so I appreciate that. What's the timeline? Are you going, if this is approved, when will you start?
We'd like to start this winter, if this is approved, and then we would come back with the bids and
okay. You mentioned that the sidewalk at Whitman would be ADA compliant.
Mm-hmm.
That hill at Longfellow is kind of steep, and there's not a lot of parking, and I don't recall, I should because I go there, but I don't recall if there's a ramp going up to that entrance currently. Is there going to have to be a reconfiguration to allow access and be ADA compliant?
Are you speaking of Longfellow or Whitman?
Longfellow.
Longfellow. Longfellow currently, it's a single, there's no stairs, and it is...
Oh, there's a step up to the entrance.
Yeah.
There is.
Everything is ADA compliant. Anything that we do now would be ADA compliant.
Well, currently there's an entrance on the lower level where you can come right off the visitor parking lot, and then you can have access to an elevator. If you're coming from North Avenue, there's a step up, and I don't recall if there's a ramp on the west side of that entrance or not. I don't think there is. So anyway, I just wanted to, you mentioned that the sidewalk that the DOT was going to put in at Whitman would be ADA compliant, but I didn't hear that about Longfellow. So I'm just hoping that that's a part of the planning process that and we just haven't heard about it.
Correct. Everything here was ADA compliant.
Okay.
Now with renovations, with ADA laws and policies, we can't do a renovation that we did at Longfellow without having ADA compliance at this point now. So yes, everything was, and that's also why you'll see a significant jump in price probably at Longfellow.
Yeah, because the access from that lower parking lot is going to be difficult in a chair or anybody with limited mobility.
Correct, and the Longfellow hill, the steepness of that hill, is actually very similar to the steepness of Whitman.
Right.
What we're going to need to do is we do significant cuts into the turf itself, build erosion and retaining wall to cut into that, but they are wide enough also so that we can plow it.
And then I agree that we need to control the entrances. I just do have a question about whether the students will, at East in particular, just because that's my personal experience, but I think this applies at all the schools. The student entrances and the student parking lots are not necessarily close to these entrances. So will they still be able to use the other entrances before school starts?
Before school, the doors are open currently, and they would remain open for the first 15 minutes until the bell rang.
Okay.
And then they would go into lockdown.
Thank you.
And this is and let me clarify as well, this will help control visitor, and it's a visitor management. It's part of that visitor management piece that will also work hand in hand with the Raptor system.
Okay, thank you.
Other board members?
Me.
Mrs. Casey?
I thank you for this report, and I feel lucky that I've been in all of these buildings, so I had a pretty good mental visual of what you're speaking of, and I think, you know, how extra challenging this is because of the age of our buildings, but I appreciate it, and it's keeping our kids safe, so it's essential. Thank you for the report.
Okay, before I ask for community comment on these reports, are there any questions for Mr. Mack at this point on this portion? Okay. Then I will ask for community comment on this report. Please step to the microphone. Give your name and address, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Deb Falk-Palick. I live at 7435 West Wells Street. And first of all, I want to thank everyone for their service to the community. I truly appreciate it. I came here tonight to actually just speak about one specific part of Ms. Nedesheim's presentation, and that's the Longfellow bathrooms. 4 years ago, I was one of the PTA officers there, and we were in the envious position of having some extra funds to figure out what to do with. And we had discussed with administration, teachers, and my favorite thing to do is talk to students about what would you do with the money. And we received pretty much 3 themes. We want more balls for recess, we would like air conditioning, and the bathrooms. And that intrigued me, and I asked more about that, and I think the problems that were addressed tonight are what I heard too, and have continued to have heard. This keeps coming up every once in a while, and it's the sinks. You can't turn them on. If you're somebody with a disability, that maybe you only are a student that has the use of one arm, or you're somebody coming to see a play at Longfellow and you can't independently operate that, or you're just part of the general student population. I've heard kids say, I don't wash my hands because it's too hard. And the other issue are the locks on the bathroom stalls. I don't think some of these things, I'm not a plumber, I don't know how much this costs, but I think some of these things can just be tweaked or adjusted to make it a little bit easier. I've heard from students as recently as today that they don't line up properly, so if you're in one stall and some girl is next to you and slams the door too hard, your stall door is going to fling open, and that could be a mortifying thing as a middle school child to have happen to you. I've heard tonight that these modifications for the bathroom, I believe how I heard this is that they are in the budget, and I hope that, and I would encourage to make sure these changes do occur. One of the district OTs has also I've been in communication with her, and she's provided feedback about some of our students with special needs and the difficulties they're having with the sinks and washing their hands and using the locks. But I really, as I've spoken with more parents, I see this now more as a general public health concern. If we have 800 and some odd students that are having problems washing their hands with cold and flu season and everything else we hear about, it becomes problematic. So I would hope and encourage the board to make sure that there is some funding. Just even myself and the OT had suggested one sink in every bathroom, just having some different type of handle on it to make it accessible for people, and making sure one lock is easy to work, and possibly consulting with our OTs in the district about what are easier types of locks to have. And then if I can say something about the Jefferson playground, I wasn't going to talk about this, but I was one of the Jefferson PTA Buildings and Grounds Committee members, and I would just encourage the board as the plans move forward on that to take a look at what the parent group is presenting. I was strongly advocating for making sure that there were accessible features, because it is a school in our district that has students who use wheelchairs and other mobility impairments, and so I just want to make sure that you get that information to see what that is and what it's looking like, and those components are in there. So thank you again.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Nedesheim, Ms. Nedesheim. Okay, we then move into our action items. Business services, Mr. Meyer, please.
It is recommended that the school board approve the attached approved 2014 to 15 budget. Fund expenditures are summarized as follows. Number 1, revising the 2014 to 15 school district budget. Whereas Chapter 65, Paragraph 90, Subparagraph 5A, Wisconsin statutes requires the school board by a 2/3 vote of the entire membership to approve alteration made to the previously adopted 2014-2015 budget. And whereas the school board adopted the 2014-2015 budget on June 9, 2014, now therefore be it resolved that the school board does hereby make the following alterations to the 2014-2015 budget. General Fund 10, previously approved, $74,177,720, adjustment of a positive adjustment of a positive $1,066,161, giving a revised total of $75,243,881. Donation Fund 21, previously approved at $90,500, zero adjustment, giving a revised amount of $90,500. Special Education Fund 27, previously approved at $11,239,916, with an adjustment of a positive $249,850, giving a revised total of $11,489,766. Capital Expansion Fund 41, previously approved at $3,340,000, with an adjustment of a positive $975,000, giving a revised budget amount of $4,315,000. Food Services Fund 50, previously approved at $2,036,746, adjusted by a positive $212,065, giving a revised total of $2,248,811. Recreation Department Fund 80, previously approved at $1,825,644, adjusted at a positive $91,944, giving a revised budget amount of $1,917,588. Total expenditures for all funds previously approved at $92,710,526, with a positive adjustment total of $2,595,020, giving a revised total of $95,305,546. Less inter-fund operating transfer from Fund 10, previously approved at a negative $6,537,379, adjusted by a negative $269,665, giving a revised adjustment total of a negative $6,807,044. Net total expenditures for all funds previously approved at $86,173,147, with a net adjustment of $2,325,355, giving a net total expenditures all funds revised budget of $88,498,502. Item 2, setting the tax levy. Resolution. Whereas sections 120.10, 120.12, paragraph 3, and 120.44, paragraph 2, Wisconsin statutes authorize and require the school board to determine the amount of monies necessary to be raised through taxation to operate and maintain the schools of the Wauwatosa School District, and whereas sections 120.10, paragraph 10M, and 120.44, paragraph 2, Wisconsin statutes authorize the school board to vote a tax to create a fund for the purpose of financing current and future capital expenditures related to buildings and sites. And whereas Section 120.12, paragraph 3, Wisconsin statutes requires the school district clerk to certify to the city clerk of the city of Wauwatosa the amount so determined, and whereas the school board is interested in complying with the foregoing statutory requirements, now therefore be it resolved that the school board does hereby determine that $42,851,171 shall be necessary to be raised through taxation to operate and maintain the schools of the school district for the 2014-2015 school year. Be it further resolved that said money shall be allocated and utilized as follows. General Fund, previously approved at $39,265,808, adjusted by a negative $1,489,504, giving a revised amount of $37,776,304. General Fund, refund rescinded chargeback, previously approved at $1,645, adjusted by $1, to give a revised amount of $1,646. General Fund personal property chargeback, previously approved at $7,149, with a zero adjustment, giving a revised amount of $7,149. Capital Expansion Fund, previously approved at $3,340,000, with an adjustment of $975,000, giving a revised amount of $4,315,000. Recreation Department, previously approved at $751,072, with an adjustment of zero, giving a revised amount of $751,072, all totaling at previously approved $43,365,674, adjusted by a negative $514,503, giving a revised total of $42,851,171, and I so move.
I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Casey. Board members, did you want to speak for board discussion? Okay. Board members, questions or comments?
I would just like to thank Mr. Meyer for doing a nice job reading that.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
This is the walking illness section of the school board over here. No, me, I'm choking, drinking water, but we got through her. Okay, thank you.
Glad I didn't have to read it.
Okay.
Randall? Do
Yes,
we
Mrs.
do we
Neufeld.
have a presentation?
And that's where I'm going next.
Okay, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Okay, Mr. Mack?
Okay.
Thank you.
Try not to read as many numbers as Mr. Meyer.
Yeah, please.
I'm gonna start with the tax levy. For 14-15, the general fund tax levy, 37.8 million, down from last year, 39.4 million. Capital expansion fund, 4.3 million, up from 2.25 million last year. And you have to look at those numbers together because it's really the numbers under the revenue cap. If you lower the general fund levy, you can increase the capital expansion fund. The only reason we use the capital expansion fund is because we're a negative aided district in the tertiary aid, and it actually gives us a special amortization schedule that pulls us out of the negative aid, or can pull us out. So it's to our advantage to use that fund. The other advantage sometimes is that people actually just see the capital projects in that fund. And one other thing I want to point out, some of the projects that are in the capital expansion fund now used to be paid, and they were considered small projects on all of Bruce Johnson's days in Fund 10. During this past audit, the auditors basically said that you need to capitalize more of your capital projects, and we have a capitalization level of $5,000. So a lot of the projects that used to be in Fund 10, I was able to move them to Fund 41 because you can only use Fund 41 for projects that are capitalized, and that simply means that they're gonna be depreciated on our GADB set of financial statements, not the fund financial statements, but they're depreciated and treated a special way on our financial statements. So that is the reason for capital expansion in there. So total under the revenue cap, 42 million, down from 41,663 last year, and the recreation department had 751,000. It's frozen again under Act 20 from 2013 by the state. So the total without chargeback is 42,842,376 versus last year 42,414,574. And the refund chargebacks 1,646 versus 1,059,000 last year. And the personal property chargeback 7,149,7,149 versus 0. I just want to explain to you why there's two categories of that, just so you know, because it is a little bit confusing. Under the refund chargebacks, that is basically where a business or a homeowner appeals how much their property is worth, and they want a reassessment, and if they would win, then the bill would send to the Department of Revenue and we get charged back. Under a personal property chargeback, it's basically the instance where a taxpayer delinquent paying money to the city. So there's a fine line on the differential there, and the way I have to do the accounting for it is actually different. The refund chargebacks go into the revenue cap under a different, they go under a different source code than the personal property chargeback. That's why you see that, just so you understand that. There is a reason that. So the total levy, 42,851,000 versus last year 43,474,475. The general fund going down 1.6 million or 4.14%. Capital expansion going up 2 million or 91%. The subtotal under the revenue cap is going up 427,802, 1.03%. And just so you know, actually I thought this would go up or slightly down a little bit, but we had a membership growth under the 3-year average this year of 37. And when I presented the budget in June, I had 0 in there. So that's the difference between that. I actually thought that would be right around 0, and that's the difference between the 1% and why we're going up slightly. So the total tax levy is going up under the revenue cap 427,802. And with the refund chargebacks out, the total tax levy is actually going down 623,304 on minus 1.43%. I don't really look at it that way. I think we're going up slightly, but that because I didn't look at it, we were going up when we were doing the other way when we included the refund chargebacks in there. The only way this can go up for the tax levy is with the revenue cap increase and with the aid changes from year to year. Equalization aid went up. Actually, I was a little bit surprised, but we work on that with the capital expansion fund. The levy effect, minus 625,855, so that lowered the levy 1.48%. The chapter 228 came down 266,000, which increased levy 0.63%. The computer aid increase decreased the levy 84,000, 0.2%. The revenue cap increase was $75 per member, 872,026, 2%, and again, half of that came from membership growth. The recreation department was no change, so the total there it is again, 427,802 is 1.01%, and without the recreation department, 427,802, 1.03. The difference is there is you got the recreation base included in there, so it changes the percentage just a little bit. With the chargeback, same numbers basically. I'm just going to go towards the bottom there. With the refund chargeback out, minus 2.43% lowered the levy, and the personal property chargeback increase, it's a minor fraction at $7,000. So the total decrease in the levy this year is gonna be 623,304 minus 1.43%. Graphically, just looking at this, 42,842, it's pretty close to 0910. So for the past 6 years, it's relatively flat in there. If you just look at that, and just looking at the same picture almost, that's without the recreation department included, 42,091. So tax increase, just for the funds under revenue limit, 1.03%. Graphically, you can see, again, if you look at the 1 added to the 366 versus the -2 and the -4, we're slightly down over the past 4 years. If you look at the nominal tax levy plotted out over time, you can see that line going up, and that's in nominal dollars, which means whatever the dollars were of that year. I like to look at it in real dollars, and this is basically looking at adjusted for inflation using the CPIU, which is the Urban Consumer Price Index. And if you look at that, actually the levy almost perfectly flat from last year. In fact, it is. And it goes back again about 7 years to 41.3 back in 08 in real dollars. So the levy in real dollars pretty flat the last seven years, even though you see some going up, but it's going back down again. The property tax and state resources, if you look at that property tax line, you look at that 51.5% of the revenue there. That's pretty flat, even though you see a little bit in 12-13, or 11 to 12. But if you go all the way back to 2000, it's remained at about 50%. And as you can see, the state resources have dwindled over that same amount of time. If you go way back to 2000, that's when the state guaranteed the 2/3 funding on education, and then that quickly went away. So that drop in the state aid was a lot of the spending cuts when we were cutting all the time, and then basically it come back up a little bit because they've lowered the spending under the revenue cap. So that's just a picture that I like to look at from year to year to see what's happening. The equalized value and tax rate. We'll talk about more about this a little bit later. But if you look at the bottom on that, equalized value change, and I don't want to confuse you, but this has TID out, which means the tax incremental districts are not included in here. It's going up 9.7%. And if you look at the rates, it looks like, wow, our taxes are going to go way down. If you look at the total with the tax chargeback, they're going down 10.15%, but that's not going to happen on your tax bill. The city reassessed. This is kind of a year late on the equalized value side. So those tax rates, I'm not going to show the example when I show the amount for a home, because that's not going to happen. That is simply just what the equalized value is catching up now to what the city has for the assessed value. For a typical home in Wauwatosa, I used a $220,000 example, and I calculated this myself, the equalized levy rate. I used the last year's tax rate, and I just decreased it 1.43% because that's what our levy is going down. So if you calculate that out, the taxes on a home will be about $2,031 in 2015 versus $2,061 this past year, so a decrease of about $30 there. And again, this is just the tax rate comparison. I don't give a lot of meaning to this myself, but I'm going to show it because in some years this is accurate, but I can tell you that this year we're showing it going way down is inaccurate just because the equalized value is following the assess, and the assess is done already. It's in the tax rate for what was put out for the tax bills. Looking at the budget now for expenditure changes from the proposed to the revised budget, this is just going to focus a few slides on what I presented in June versus what's happening now. The consolidated budget, when I further consolidated budget, I'm talking about everything under the revenue limit, is going up $2 million. Salaries and benefits from when I presented it in June are down $230,000. And health insurance came down $190,000 because we had another really good year with health insurance. And the 5% increase that I had in the budget in June, I was able to lower that to 4.22%. And that's a calculation that is done by our third-party insurance consultant, Hayes. Under the Wisconsin retirement system, that was lowered $60,000, and that's simply because the rate that I had projected was a little bit higher than what the actuals came out to be. And salaries, that minor $34,000 increase from what I showed in June, and that's simply because of the actual placements and the estimated increases to actual settlements. But keep in mind that $34,000 is on $44 million in salaries, so that's very small. For the consolidated budget, purchase services, up 1.5 million almost from the June to now. Tuition to other districts is up 181,651, and that's simply what we pay to other districts for open enrollment. Payment for educational services up 272,000, and that's a little bit different type of payment. That's really for the online virtual school. We pay the third-party provider for the services for the online school. And then capital projects are up 975,500. Non-capital equipment, I'm gonna go through those projects and just a little bit later on. Non-capital equipment, 595, 159 increase. A lot of this, the building-based carryover supplies is up 55,972. Non-capital equipment is up 373,842, primarily the result of building-based carryover where the principals put their money in their budget, and Chromebook replacements that we did over this past summer. And then instructional software is up 101,020, and that's primarily in federal grants. Insurance is up 45,000, and that's simply because under workers' compensation, our premium refund is down $40,000. And I don't want to get into too much again, but when you do workers' compensation premium, you're doing it on estimated payroll, and then at the end of the year, we have an audit that bases it on actual, and we get if we overpaid or underpaid, we either have to pay or get some money back. The previous year I had 51,000 in refund. This past year we only got 11,000. So that's the difference between why that changed a little bit. And then other objects, 118,000 is increased, and that's primarily because I got a letter from the city of Wauwatosa that we're going to have DOR tax chargebacks that increase about $100,000, and then those are those other chargebacks that I showed you on the levy, but that'll be for next year when we actually collect on that, but we have to pay the city a year in advance on that. Now we're going to look at the total budget expenditures on a year-to-year basis. The net general fund, 68.4 million. The special ed fund, just under 11.5 million. The capital expansion fund, 4,315,000 for total expenditures of $84,241,603. The recreation department is $1,917,588. The food service fund, $2,248,811, and the donation fund, $90,500. The net general fund, which excludes the interfund transfers, is up $472,000 or 0.7%. The special ed fund up $451,000, 4.09%. The capital expansion fund is up $1,459,000 or 51%. Total increase $2,383,694 or 2.91%. The recreation department up slightly, $17,967 or 0.95%. The food service fund is actually down $115,261, and that mainly because the project has been completed. And the donation fund is no change. Looking graphically at the budget changes, again, if you look at the last 4 years, we've actually had slightly more in decreases than additions. You got 6.5% versus 7.5% that it's gone down over the past 4 years. Looking broken down by category, salaries $44.6 million of the budget, benefits $18.89 million, purchase services $14.1 million, non-capital objects $4.6 million, capital objects $768,000, insurance $905,000, and other objects $275,361, for a total of $84,241,603 and up 2.91%. The salaries are up $591,131 or 1.34%. Benefits are actually down $1,077,000 minus 5.4%. Purchase services are up $3 million or 27%. Non-capital objects down $393,000 or 7.87%. Capital objects are down $43,500, 5.36%. Insurance is up $303,000, 50.33%, and other objects just down slightly $3,000, 1%. And it's the same number again, 2.3 million, 2.91%. Just looking at it graphically, just real quickly, salaries and benefits in our budget are 75.43% of the total budget. Purchase services just under 17%. Non-capital objects 5.47%. Capital objects just under 1%, and insurance, debt, and other is about 1.4%. Salary increases, $591,131. The teacher salary increase that I show on the budget book, $1,325,260, 4.39%. There was a little bit higher in the past, but that's simply when teachers leave and new staff are hired and vacancies are filled. That's how the change results in that. Custodial salary decrease, $1.474 million, down 42.16%, and that was part of the custodial change that we made. Administrators and principals, I put those together. If you look in the budget book that I handed out, they're listed separately, but I have to explain this together so you understand it better. It's up 10.2%. This includes the new student learning inclusion position. You can explain that more if you want, but they include that. Include the 1.0 principal ad for 1 year with changes in staffing. Include 1.0 administrator as a principal mentor. There's actually another position in the budget, and it's split this year. There's like $60,000 in the salary account and money in a personal services this year because Dr. Earl is utilizing a third-party company this year to do that role because of the timing of the hiring. If you take those three things together, the increase would be 2.23%, which includes the adjustments that were made for some people's salaries. So that's how that's explained. One other thing in here, if you've noticed on the budget book, there's a new category called interventionist, and that is $439,200. It's basically funded by Title I and Title I-D grants, and these positions were formerly in the aid category. So you're going to see in the budget book the aid going down because this was flipped out of there. Instead of hiring aides, these are more teacher-oriented positions. And that is the new category that is in our budget now. Looking at salaries as a percentage of the total budget, it actually shows that going down 53.01%, but I want to show you the salaries to benefits comparison because that actually is more on a trend up because benefits have been really kept in check. The reason that it's going down a little bit more is simply because there's more capital projects this year. Under benefits, going down $1,077,230 or negative 5.4%. The WRS employer portion up slightly, $71,000, $2.46%, and that just shows you the blended rates of why it's going up slightly. Health insurance, I should point out that actually if the custodial change had not been in there, that would have been higher. Okay, so it's hard to see that effect in some of this budget presentation, but that would have been higher. I just want to point that out, and because you see it in the health insurance here. The health insurance is showing only a 1.04% increase, even though I did put 4.22% in the rate increase. It's up $115,000 because the custodial outsourced the health insurance in that group was $386,000, so that brought it down. Without that, the health insurance increase would actually be over the 4.22% or 4.51 because it's also been people changing from like single to family plans. So I just wanted to show you that because it can be misleading when you say, well, how come all since yours is only up 1%? But the reasons behind it are right there. The other benefits down $1.1 million. That was the health insurance rebate that we gave to employees in prior years simply because we had a great year, a phenomenal year the year before with our health insurance plan. The benefits going down 22.42%. And if you go way back to 1995, they were 22%. You could see over time there that they went up a little bit because when the QEO was in place, the teachers protected the benefits at the expense of salary. That's generally what happened and played out in the negotiations. So that's why the line went up and now it's coming back down again. If you look at the salary to benefit ratio, it is heading up, and that's why I wanted to show that, because this is more what if you see the last 4 years, what you would typically see now, because the benefits have come down, and the salaries are going up at basically the rate of inflation. Under purchase services, the budget is going up $3 million or 27%. Facility operations is going up $1.38 million or 102%, and that's really the main change in there is to pay Dan Plout's cleaning for the custodial outsource. The capital budget going up $904,000, 26.5%. Tuition going up $508,000, 37.84%. Open enrollment and $194,651, and the payment for the online virtual school up $274,021. The personal services is also up $157,000, and I talked about this a little bit in June. That's mainly because DPI changed the object that we have to use from a 900 series for conferences and to 310. I have it in the budget at 311, but that you'll see an offset with a minus under the under the conference fees later on. Capital projects, I'm just gonna show them here a little bit differently than Melissa showed them, because you're gonna see the dollar amount with them. The Eisenhower entrance door is $10,000. Jefferson wall repair, $75,000. The Jefferson playground resurfacing, $12,500. Madison office carpet, and we had to do some abatement in there, that's what's a little bit more, $21,000. Madison kindergarten plumbing improvements, that was the sinks and the bubblers in that area, $9,000. McKinley masonry repair, $10,500. The Roosevelt heating system replacement, $450,000. And that very old system is failing. That's something that just happened. McKinley has the same type of system that is still operational, but since they were built at about the same time, I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I would assume that within the next 10 years, that same thing's going to happen at McKinley. The Roosevelt masonry repair, $40,000. The room 300 renovation repair, I don't know if you guys know much about that, but there was the water was leaking right through the brick, and we had to do some abatements in there and really clean it up before it could be used for kids again, because it was just became potentially unsafe. So we made sure that it was taken care of, and there was some work to be done with that, and it had to be done. The Roosevelt Library model, $18,000, and if you haven't seen that, I would encourage you to go look at that. It looks real nice in there. The Underwood exterior stairs, $112,000. The Washington boiler stack repair, $12,000. Again, that's just for venting the gases from the boiler. Wilson masonry repair, $50,000. There's a lot of brickwork going on. The Longfellow PA system replacement, $133,000. I've been walking around the schools, and one thing that I do notice is that in most of the schools that the PA systems are old. They look like they're from the 1950s to me. They're wooden boxes, and we're gonna be doing more of those as we go along here. I definitely think that something has to be done. How much wiring and speaker work has to be done is one thing that has to be talked about too, but we have to do more of that as going forward. The Longfellow security entrance, $125,000. You know, with those security entrances too, you know, even though they're in the budget, you know, the principals, we still have to work with them and finalize how they're gonna be in the schools. And the principals are the ones that have to say, okay, before we can really go ahead and do this thing. So they're in the budget, and hopefully that they, you know, the public will feel that there is an added sense of security, because I believe that we're doing as much as we possibly can do to make those buildings safer by doing something like this at each of those 4 schools at least now. The Longfellow restroom remodel, I don't know if you guys have ever been in the restrooms at Longfellow, but they're bad. They need to be redone. The Longfellow masonry repair, $65,000. The gym scoreboards, $20,000. The playground resurfacing is $15,000. The Whitman soccer finishing it up, $1.2 million. Whitman boiler replacement, $310,000. Whitman security entrance is $100,000. The East biology labs were $255,000. The East security entrance, $75,000. That air handling unit that Melissa talked about, it's big. It's a big fan that blows the heat in about a third of the building. And the East theater renovation and planning, I have $50,000. Probably going to be less than that, but we need to see what that's going to cost if we're going to move forward with that. The fire sprinklers in the East basement, $30,000. East masonry repair, $15,000. The East fire door in the basement, $10,000. The West-Southwest roof replacement, I think all of you have seen that, $490,000. The West biology lab were $125,000. The West security entrance, $25,000. The starting blocks at the pool, $17,000. The West music hallway lighting, $7,000, and I'm told that's very nice, but I haven't been and seen that yet. nice and bright. The Fisher baseball field, just finishing up some money that hasn't been paid out yet, $78,000. It's a rebudget. Fisher East Wing, broken down at the start of the summer, $65,000. The Fisher HR remodel, which that hasn't been touched, I don't think, since the building was built, $30,000. And then there's some seed money for anything that has to go in the next year. And just so you know, a lot of these smaller projects may have been in Fund 10 if you went back in time, but I'm pushing into Fund 41 so we get the nice amortization schedule and helps us with equalization aid. The non-capital objects down $393,834, 7.87%. There's a lot of things in here, but I tried to pick out the main ones. The non-capital equipment is down $474,000 or 24.87%. Teacher laptops that we bought in the previous year were negative $415,000. The overhead projector replacement down $145,000. We replaced most of those. Now we just have some money in there for some breakdowns and replacement. The Chromebook replacements that we did over summer added $190,000. The cleaning operations equipment down $68,000, and security equipment down $50,000. Same thing in the non-capital objects. The cleaning operation, that minus $112,000 was really for the custodial change that we made. There were a couple things that went up in supplies, and that mainly the building-based budget carryover. And then instructional software is up $102,000, and it's primarily from the IDEA grant that they're buying some software in special ed. Capital objects down $43,500, and that's simply an accounting change with rental. Again, that's just an internal accounting thing that was changed from a 500 object to a 900. Insurance is up $303,000 or 50%. The workers' comp premium is actually down $33,000. The unemployment compensation is up $320,000. And both of those things combined have to do with the custodial outsourcing in the first year. The other objects down $3,000 or 1%. The accounting change with the conference fees down $113,628, and then increase has to do with the DOR property tax chargebacks of $100,000. Going to the revenue side, and I kind of went through some of this with the property tax, $42 million for 14-15, up 1.03%. State sources, $27,108,000, up from $25,753,000 last year, 5.26%. The federal sources went down slightly with the grant changes, $3 million basically, $3.1 million last year. And in the local sources, $9,525,000 next year, down 5% from $10,047,000 last year. Total revenues, $81,726,976 versus $80,634,017, up 1.36%. And those tax chargebacks, to be consistent, are in with the local chargebacks. That's why primarily that is down, but then it goes up a little bit because of the open enrollment revenue. You'll see that in a little bit. Property tax, up $427,802, 1%. State sources up $1.35 million, 5.26%. Federal sources down $167,000, 5%. And local sources down $522,000, minus 5%. Total revenues again up just a little over $1 million or 1.36%. And graphically, just looking at that, the property tax is 51.5%, state sources 33.17%, and in the federal 3.67%, and the local sources, excuse me, 11.66%. The property tax, I explained with the levy, and the state source is up 1.35 million. Equalization aid is up 625,000. Chapter 228 is down 266,000, and that's the result of the phase out of the program. We keep going down. We're down in the next past year 100. We went down 40 FTE in the 220 program, 165 to 125 now. The revenue cap aid, $75 to $150, is up $457,200, and that helps with our spending, but it's not under the revenue cap. So therefore, it's not in the equalization formula. That means that all districts get to spend that amount, and there's no aid effect on it. There's some, that to me, that's more of a political thing, but it is what it is. They basically put the money in to the school districts to avoid having to pay aid on that amount. So I'll stop there. That's a whole explanation in and of itself. DOR easement rent, we're going to get $150,000 basically for the state Department of Transportation to come in to build that pedestrian bridge over using some land on Whitman and back behind on West. And there is a potential that we may have to move some of the ropes course, those tall climbing things that they use for the rope class. If that happens, what the state does is they compensate you ahead of time. So if we have to move it, we have to move it. If they'll try to do it without, but if they say that's in the way, we have to move it. And there's potential that it could damage a tree when they build that bridge, but they're usually pretty careful, and it generally gives them an easement for a limited amount of time, and they compensate you for that. County program revenue is up 196,000. And that's simply reimbursement from expenses that were made in 13-14. Special education aid up almost $59,000. And tax exempt computer aid up 84,000. And stage project grant, that's the educator effectiveness grant that we get from the state of Wisconsin to help with that implementation. Federal sources, down 167,000. Medicaid reimbursement, I put that in the budget at minus 100,000, and it fluctuates. It just fluctuates, and I want to be more conservative with it, based on Medicaid reimbursement for kids that attend our district. And grant changes were 616. The local sources were down 522,175, and again, the primary reason is I have the chargeback levy in there, not in the taxes, 1,058,000 there, and then tuition pushes it back up for open enrollment, 638,931 up, and that's simply because the open enrollment amount is went up $150 over the previous year, and we have a few more kids in open enrollment this year over last year. And then another change, the TIF money we got from TIF number 4 closure this past year, there's no TIF closing this year. We will have another, the big TIF is closing, I think it's TIF number 2 is going to close in 15-16. So the total tax levy without the rec department, $42,091,304, increase of $427,802. 1.03%, and then it's the same dollar amount with the rec department, but it's a bigger base, so it's an increase of 1.01%. And then with what's going to actually happen to the tax bills with the prior year chargebacks decreasing 623,304 with the total tax levy, it's going to go down 1.43%, and that's when I gave you that example. It's about $30,000 on a $220,000 home. Looking at food services, and I just wanted to include this so you have a little understanding what's going on with the other funds. the budget expenditures, 2.248 million, is down 4.88%. Looking at the salary benefit breakdown, because we use Sodexo, the purchase of services are the biggest area, 1.6 million in that set of expenditures. We still have 16 employees that are our own salaries and benefit. That's what's included in there. And then the non-capital items are just replacement lunch tables and equipment that we buy for Sodexo to make the food service program better for our own kids, like chef cooking stations and things of that nature. Budgeted revenues for food service, $2,094,000, up 3.54%. And you can look at the breakdown there. Food sales, the vast majority of it, 1.15 million. Federal aid, 915,000, and the federal free and reduced is about 800,000 of that 915,000. The state aid, 26,000, and again 2,094,000. The recreation department, 1.917 million, up 0.95%. Relatively flat. Salaries, benefits, basically just a little bit higher than last year, 1.1 million there. Purchase services, 432,000. Non-capital, 132,000. Some capital items, 103,000. Other expenditures, 21,000. Total expenditures, 1.915 million. On the recreation department, the total revenue, 1.7 million, down from 1.779 million. It's decreasing $60,000, 3.39%. Again, under Wisconsin Act 20, we cannot increase the rec levy again this next year. So I just wanted to just show you this. In 13-14, we use 161. That's actual. That 161,219. That's how much fund balance we needed to use because we couldn't increase taxes in the rec department in 13-14. For 14-15, I have 198,256. That's how much the levy would actually go up in Fund 80. So we'll see what happens next year. If they don't allow it or they put some type of revenue control on that levy, we're gonna have to either raise the amount they're charging for the services or cut some of the services that are being provided, because we can't keep going at that rate of using fund balance in Fund 80. The percentage of revenues for non-levy is 56.32, down from 57.8. Not that big of a change.
Could I
So,
ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not so much a question as just a highlight. You know, there's a lot of important information here, but I think for the community, the idea of our beloved rec department, you know, having to raise service fees or cut programs under the current state laws, I think that's important. Was I hearing that correctly? Not this year, but
In the future.
in the future.
it will be, I think personally, with everything that I've heard, that we will be able to increase the levy next year. So, but I just wanted to put it out there. That's what I try to do with it. So I just want you to understand what's been happening with this because of the hold that they put on the recreational department for them.
And they being, who's they?
Who's they?
Yeah, who's
The
putting this
legislature.
The
put it on.
legislature, okay. So, all right, just so, because early warning for the community that if things keep going the way they're going, we will see either increased rec department fees or cut services. Is that what we're saying
Right.
tonight? Okay.
And more than likely, it will be increased fees, because we're not going to cut the services.
I understand, but the minute we increase fees, and appropriately so, people are going to take notice of that and come to the microphone and want to know why, and why was this a surprise? Well, so we're saying it tonight that the direction that this is going in from the legislature, this is where it will go. Now, it's not a lot amount of money, but for some households it will be, for some households it will matter. And so, all right, so we've highlighted that. Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You know what, too, is one thing that probably could be done is we could have Mike Wick come and explain the recreation programs in more detail when he does his presentation of what he wants, what he's planning on doing to address it. Because I did send an email to him on this, and he understands this. It's just that it's an issue. And I just want you guys to be aware of it so that you know what's been happening with that because of the freeze that's been put on. It's really because of that Wisconsin Act 20 that was passed in 2013. That froze the levy.
Okay.
This slide, I want to talk to you about because it's really a neat effect for next year. And I just want you to be aware of this because when I saw this, I got really queasy. When we get our aid in this school year, in this fall, they actually use the equalized value from the previous year. Okay, that's just the way it's done at the state. When I show you the tax rates, remember I showed you them going up 9.7%. When they show you the tax rates, you use the current equalized value. Next year, they're going to use the current equalized value to calculate our aid. So all things just stay the same. Let's just say everything stays the same. And I take the $5.1 billion number and replace it in the aid formula right now that has $4.673 billion. We lose $3.7 million in equalization aid. So that means without anything that we do, because the assessed value in Wauwatosa has gone up and equalization aid has followed, there's going to be 11.5% increase in our levy next year with us doing nothing. And we have no control over that whatsoever. And I can't say any more on that. I guess if you guys want to talk about that a little bit after we're done here, that's fine. But I wanted people to understand this early because it's a huge impact on our taxes. I'm not sure what's happening on the other side with the city if how that's been redistributed with the increase in assessed value, but we probably won't. I put the 3.7 million. There's a 15% aid hold harmless in the aid formula. We'll lose 3 million the first year, and then the second year we'll lose the other 700,000. But in total, it's going to be about 3.7 million from that. That's the end of the financial piece. What I'm going to do is turn it over now to Dr. Earl, who will talk about how the financial piece supports the mission and goals of the long-range plan, and how the budget aligns with student achievement.
And I think it's important to just point out our mission statement in our long-range plan. I think Mrs. Randall pointed out, it's not an either-or issue when it comes to how we spend money. Everything is taken into consideration in relationship to priorities. And what I'm going to touch on is some of the things that we do offer as a school district that our budget helps to support. This year we have our effectiveness project that's underway, and we talked about a grant that came through from the state of Wisconsin to help with that, but as the additional training and components that go into our evaluation system or effectiveness project, something we're instituting this year. Also, we're working on a central office. It's the COPES, Central Office Performance. I'm not sure of the whole acronym. But there's also the central office and then the district administrator, 2 components that are new this year. So we're working, we have the principals being evaluated through the system as well. Summer school opportunities, our summer school continues to grow. We have, we expanded the time the students are in class, and we've expanded the number of courses, and we continue to get positive feedback on our summer school program. Over half of our students attend summer school. Instructional coaching model and principal coaching, we continue with our instructional coaches. We have 3 new instructional coaches at the elementary level, and we've got, Mr. Mack pointed out, a consulting service working with our principals on coaching, and really trying to help all of them get better teachers and coaches. For the principals, this is the first time we've undertaken something like this, and hopefully it will pay dividends. We continue with our math and literacy coaching. Our instructional coaches are working in math and literacy as well, but we have outside consultants working with us on math and literacy. Security camera update and expansion that was approved tonight. I'm not going to get into where all the cameras are going and where the expansion is, but we had some spots that we needed to cover, and now they will be covered with the new camera systems. And the general compensation increase, I think we've talked about that over time, that most of the employees in the district have a compensation increase, and teachers receive the compensation increase upward toward 5%. So the budget was able to support that as well. Summer Staff Development Academy model, we did something this past summer with bringing a lot of teachers, probably more than we ever have, working on staff development and looking to try to extend something like that program into next summer. The updating of science rooms, I don't think we need to talk a whole lot more about that, but it's pretty exciting if you get the opportunity to go into or go through any of those rooms at East or West High School in particular. I think you'll notice a completely different feel for our science program. We restructured our district safety model. That is something Ms. Nettesheim is leading now. Talked about the secondary secure entrances, and I think that's important that we keep moving forward on that. But our safety model also isn't just building safety. It's student safety. It's emotional safety. We see a lot about mental health as well coming through different school districts and through the news, and that's something we're going to be addressing through our safety model as well, the district safety model. We relocated the Wauwatosa Virtual Academy to on Mayfair Road in an office building. Upgrades of technology, the Chromebooks that we purchased, we continue to get more updates on our technology program. I think that's something that we have to do it. Our students are prepared for it. Our students use the technology, and we know we're doing a good job of integrating technology as we've, I think I have it in there. All the instructional coaches at the secondary level for technology as well, we invested in that position. It's 2 half-time positions to help with our use of technology. And the continued funding of SROs. We did get a letter from the Wauwatosa Police Department that we were able to share with our auditors regarding our SROs, that they are not just school-based, that they do work out in the community as well. We're not positive. There's not a final ruling as of right now. The DPI hasn't given really any new guidance on the use of the 80 fund for SROs, but we do have it included in there, and we, our auditors have shared with us that it's an acceptable use at this point in time. Montessori school, the 7th and 8th grade was approved, and we're continuing to grow that school into the entire lower level of this building. Grading for Learning, we're continuing with that process and full implementation at the 4 secondary schools. Staff development is something that will be ongoing with that, as well as the use of Power School. Our PLC weekly time continues, and we need to continue to focus on our professional learning communities. That Wednesday early release, I don't know how I can overstate the importance of that time, that we continue to use that time, have that time, hold true to what that time was intended for, and making sure we keep that focus, and that's what we're planning to do. In our building leadership team model for professional development, I believe our first BLT is this week, Thursday, for elementary BLTs, and that's the model that we paid forward with staff development. each building has a leadership team that pays that forward throughout the buildings. And I mentioned the I knew I had that in here. Technology integration with instructional coaches and the integration specialist. Technology means nothing if people don't know how to use it or don't have the desire to use it. We know the kids are ready. We got to make sure that us as adults working in the schools know how to use it to make learning more powerful, and that's what's intended with those positions. Our continued support for Beyond Diversity training. Our restructured student services, Mr. Mack had mentioned the additional administrative position. That's the one position. We have one teaching and learning position and 5 supervisors that operate in that department. And our continued improvement of school facilities and athletic fields, and there'll be more coming forward as we work through that. So that's just one small snapshot of some of the priority items that we use the budget for, the budget supports our work in the schools and with student learning.
Thank you, Dr. Riddle. Thank you, Mr. Mack, for the presentation also. I greatly appreciate the detailed presentation. I will ask for board comments or questions at this time also. Okay, then seeing none, I also would like to comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
I had a question.
Sure, Mr. Bodden.
The salary and benefits, the 75%, is that very typical?
Yeah, it is.
I mean, it really hasn't changed.
Yeah, they're going to range between probably 72 to 78, but that's probably right on 78.5%.
Is that pretty typical for most districts?
Yep.
Okay. And one other question. When you talked about the Fund 41, and let's just talk about since we were talking about a little bit tonight about the West Field at 1.5 million, and Mr. Cronin brought up the idea of possible using it for instruction or helping our students in academic ways. Is that possible to go from one fund to another? In other words, you have some monies set aside, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that possible to go? Do you know what I'm asking? You have you have a 1.5 million or 2 million.
Yeah, if you put, here's the way it would work. Even like I put that money in every year for project contingency starts, that money in Fund 41, we'll always use Fund 41. So even if money was pushed in there and not used, the next year it would be used, and we wouldn't have to levy money into there. Okay?
Right.
So 10 and 41, the only difference between the two is the state at a point in time set up Fund 41, the capital expansion fund for districts who were being hurt by the negative tertiary aid. And what it does is when, let's say we spend this $4 million in Fund 41, that $4 million doesn't go into net shared costs, which would cost us a lot in aid. Next year it'll be divided by, I believe, 13. So only 1/13 of the $4 million will go into net shared costs. And that's a huge advantage for negative tertiary aid districts, because otherwise you're going to lose a lot of aid when you start doing capital projects. And that's why I use it. Simply, that's the only reason. And the other thing that I have to do fiscally to plan this out is when you do a plan as large of East, like if we do go ahead with that at $5 million, I want to spread that over 2 fiscal years, so that all of the, even though it's going to be divided maybe by 14 and 15, so that spreads that net shared cost even further out, so that I don't get hit with aid loss and hurt the taxpayers with that. So I try to plan that stuff so it has the least negative impact to the taxpayer. It's critical to do that. Because if you put that all in Fund 10, you'd lose a lot of aid. Our levy would go way up.
Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Meerfeld?
Thank you. That was extremely detailed and well put together. The amount of work that goes behind the scenes, I just can't thank the administration and everyone in the buildings who who works on that and what we're delivering to the community and the children. Obviously, the children are a priority, but we do a lot for the community. One two watch outs that are concerning me very greatly here is the trend of Fund 80 and also the equalization aid. So moving forward, obviously that's not our vote tonight, to talk about that, but moving forward legislatively, I think we should have some more activity in those two areas. I mean, they're critical. I believe that the state views us as still a very property-rich community, which in a lot of parts is not true, with our demographics. And I don't think that they're taking that into consideration. But obviously we're just one of 425, although I do believe we have a big voice in southeastern Wisconsin, so it might be time to step up and exercise that.
Agreed. Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, my final comment is, as Dr. Ertl follows up the financial piece of this with how we are using that money, I guess I'm struck again by the fact that decisions regarding improvements in our athletic fields or our buildings and how we disperse money for educational purposes has always been integrated. I guess I don't understand why now there would be a feeling of that we're doing either or. We've given direction repeatedly to Dr. Ertl, and every year with the budget presentation, we get this synopsis of how that money's being used. So, I'm not saying we shouldn't be talking about it more. I'm just saying I'm surprised when it comes up that why are we spending money on our facilities? It's something that we've been doing. It's something our community wants. We've heard it over and over and in many different ways.
One thing, just keep in mind too when we talk about improvements to athletic field. I don't know this for sure, but I think when people drive by and they're looking for a place to live and they see turfed field, I think it's a draw myself personally, because it's not just for the high school kids, because all the youth kids get to play on those fields, because you don't have to worry about mud, you don't have to worry about rain. All the kids get to play on it. The band gets to march on it and practice on it. So if you think about that, you can't know this definitively, but if we get $10,000 per kid under the revenue cap, and if you get 10 extra kids in the district because of that, you're pretty much paying for that field. Mm-hmm. And you are saving watering, cutting, maintenance on striping the field all the time. All those other savings, you probably save at least $30,000 per year per field when you do that. So there's other things to think about that way too with the athletic field. And I'm not saying that because I definitely think we need to continue doing biology labs and things of that nature inside the schools. But think of it that way, not just you're going to spend $101.5 million. Think of it as a draw to the schools, and that multiple age groups get to use the field. That's another way of looking at it too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Is there any community comment on the budget presentation? Okay, seeing none, I believe we can call the roll.
Mr. Bodden?
Yes.
Mrs. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes, thank you. We have another action item. I'm sorry, 2. Mrs. Muehlfeld, please, under Human Resources.
Yes, thank you.
Right.
It is recommended that the school board approve the administrative contract of Melissa Nettesheim as manager of building and grounds effective August 18th, 2014 for 229 days per year at a salary of $90,000. And I so move.
Second, please.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Casey. Board discussion?
I'd like to request that we take these items separately, if we can.
There is only one item under Human Resources.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Did
Just reading
you
the
want
second
to comment on that at all, Mr. Cronin?
Nope.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. Community comment, please, on this Human Resources action. Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Bodden?
Yes.
Mrs. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes. Motion passes. Thank you for your service, Ms. Nedesheim, and for your detailed reports tonight as well. Our next action item, please, Mrs. Fee.
It is recommended that the school board approve the revisions to school board bylaws 0167.3 and 0168.1 with regard to board meeting recordings and posting minutes on the website as presented at the October 13th meeting, and I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, Mrs. Muehlfeld? Okay. Board comment, please, on this bylaw revision. Mr. Cronin?
Thank you. At the last meeting, I'm going to start with this back of the document first on section 0168 minutes. We had a discussion about how many years worth of agendas and minutes and recordings of meetings would be online on the school district website. And I just want to say in discussion with Dr. Ertl since then, it's my understanding, I just want to confirm this publicly, that we are in fact loading up extra years of recordings and minutes and agendas on the website. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So they will go back like at least 5 years or so?
Are you commenting on this motion?
Yes.
Okay. So this motion does not have a time frame?
Correct.
A time component to it?
I'm just trying to find out what the district is going to do for a time component based on this policy. We had a discussion about the number of years that were on the website before.
Right, and we decided that was not going to be part of the motion.
We were leaving that up to the district. Right.
So then, let me ask it a different way. Since the motion says the approved minutes shall be posted on the district's website, does that mean all of the approved minutes for every board meeting will be on the website? Because since the time is not specified.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
Can
Mr. Meyer?
I consider that to be a board decision, and this, as far as I can see, the proposal is silent to that. So we can say what we want here, but it's not a decision with regards to those questions, because we're not voting on those.
Correct, and that was what I was trying to say.
Mr. Croner, I may agree with what you want, but all I'm saying is I don't think we're voting on the representations that are being made to you. Again, I may agree with what you're saying, right?
I'm asking about the wording of the motion that says the approved minutes shall be posted on the district's website. Does that include all of the approved minutes that we have?
Yes.
Well, but my answer would be,
No.
we haven't decided that in this. There's a retention period, I believe, of 6 years. We're allowed to destroy them after 6 is, I don't know whether even that's accurate or not, but just to say that any promise isn't binding, any representation here, it's not in our own rules. It may be a good idea to have it in our own rules. I could actually support what you want. I'm just saying that I never have put much weight on these sort of informal representations and I mean, the superintendent's an honorable man. He's going to do what he says he's going to do, but I believe we should own our own decision as far as there are minutes, there are recordings of our actions, Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
the background of this is that they were on the website until the new website was put up, and then it was Jamie Price made the decision to not put them on there. I'm just trying to return to the original position.
Okay,
My specific question is, what does this line mean? The approved minutes shall be posted on the district website. I'm not asking for some odd thing that's not related to the motion. I'm asking what that sentence means in this motion.
Okay, what I would like to clarify, Mr. Croner, is we had this discussion at the last meeting. There was a discussion about putting a time limit on when they go on how many years they're on, and so on. And you were really the only individual that wanted to do that. And after lengthy discussion, we decided to bring the motion for a vote. And I appreciate that you contacted Dr. Ertl after the meeting, and I would encourage you to do that. But the way this motion is written, I believe we're ready to vote on it.
But you can't tell me what this motion means as far as the timing of what's going to be on the website.
No, that's operational.
I don't know what operational means.
That means that Mrs. Galante will get them posted promptly and within the priority of her other duties. Is that what you're asking? We did this all at the last meeting.
Well, this is this
So I would-
meeting.
Here's what this policy means. The policy means if the board votes and approves this, from this point forward, minutes will be posted online. Anything going backward, when I said we're going to go and we're going to try to get back what was on the website, that's what we're going to do. That's what's going back onto the website. We're going to work whatever was posted, we're going to try to get it back on.
Thank you.
Somewhat what?
That's exactly what I wanted to hear.
Any other discussion? Mr. Meyer?
Mr. Ertl is an honorable man. If he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it, but he doesn't have to, according to this policy, to have a permanent record of all past minutes. So I believe in having the words mean what they say and not have informal agreements and understandings if you really believe in what you want. And I know you really do. I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just saying that as a matter of process, I'm pretty determined to respect the words that we vote on. That's all I'm saying. If
Anyone else? Mrs. Meofield?
Thank you. Only that I appreciate the clarification in this policy to some processes that we're doing that were not, that were not outlined as clear as they are in what we're voting on today.
Thank you. Mr. Croner?
Thank you, Mrs. Randall. I have a comment about the other change that's proposed about eliminating permanently the broadcasting of board meetings on the television channel, the public television channel. I don't agree with that. And one reason I don't agree with it is we're supposed to be making decisions based on data, and we don't have any data on the largest segment of the population that might be watching the channel. So I've been trying to gather some information and haven't gotten much yet. I'd like to propose that I'm going to propose a motion that we postpone voting on this until the first meeting in December so that I have time, or someone has time at least, to try to find out some more information about the seniors in our district and whether they're using this channel much or not. We really don't have any information about that at all.
Again, this was all discussed at the last
I think
meeting.
it's just time to call for a second for the motion.
Pardon me?
He's made a motion. It was a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay. Your motion is to postpone action on this item to
Until-
revise the bylaws, is that correct?
Yes, until the first meeting in December.
First meeting in December. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Board discussion on the motion? Yes, sir.
Thank you. The reason I propose that motion is just because I think we need a little bit more time just to try to gather data to see whether there's a population in our city that watches the TV channel. I think as a governmental body, even though it's not a significant amount of money, we have to move especially carefully when we're taking information away from the public or from a group of people that might use that to get important information about what we do. So by postponing it, I'm not saying that we're not going to vote on it. We're just going to delay the vote for a couple of weeks. It doesn't change anything that we do. I don't even know yet whether I should support this or not. I haven't made an opinion because I don't think I have enough information to do that. So I think just to give a little more time to try to gather some information is a reasonable thing to do.
Mrs. Casey?
I'd like to call the vote.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Galante, please call the roll.
That's point of order. That's not the appropriate way to proceed when she does that.
I believe it is. Mrs. Galante?
It's not the appropriate way. You have to vote on that motion first, and then if that passes, then you
She's
can vote on
calling the
this.
question on your motion. So we will call the roll on that, please.
Well, she has to vote on that. You have to vote on that first.
That's what she's calling the question on. Thank you.
So we're voting on his.
We are voting
amended
on Mr. Croner's motion to postpone. Thank you.
Mr. Bodden?
No.
Mrs. Casey?
No.
Mrs. Fee?
No.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
No.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
No.
And Mrs. Randall?
No. Thank you. Okay, do we have any community comments on this action item to revise this bylaw? Okay, seeing none, please call the vote. Mrs. Galante?
Mr. Bodden?
Yes.
Mrs. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
No.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes. Thank you. Okay, and one last opportunity for community comment on non-agenda items. Okay, seeing none. May I have a motion to adjourn the regular school board meeting and reconvene into a board in service regarding a school board book study? And as this in service is a working session of the board, no public comment will be entertained at this meeting.
No.
I second.
Okay, Mr. Bodden and Mrs. Casey. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bodden?
Yes.
Mrs. Casey?
Yes.
Mrs. Fee?
Yes.
Mr. Croner?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Mrs. Muehlfeld?
Yes.
Mrs. Randall?
Yes. And since we are having that here, we'll just begin right away, please.